John was diagnosed back in 2002 when he was just 16 years old by the optician. And after having been to the doctors a number of times with brain tumour symptoms of unsteadiness and terrible headaches and sickness, but a number of doctors dismissed it as various things like exam nerves and working too hard and PlayStation and different things like that. But eventually the optician diagnosed it. So he was 16 and he was in the middle of his GCSEs. He had a 10-year battle. He had a brilliant consultant, and she was keen to try different things. We didn't think when it came back, because it came back in 2008. He had sort of 6 years of almost 6 years of being clear, and then we thought he would, he was a survivor. He was fine, but when it came back, we really were given quite bad news, really, that it had come back, and perhaps there was nothing they could do about it. But his consultant actually tried a different sort of radiotherapy, a stereotactic radiotherapy, which he had then, which was less invasive than the original radiotherapy, which he couldn't have again. So he was lucky in that respect, that he had some really good treatments, and he was very strong and very determined and very positive to kick it, and he had medulloblastoma, which normally affects children. It's a pediatric tumour, which can be very aggressive, and obviously it was with John. But we thought a year of treatment in his first instance in 2002 to 2003, and he had a year of treatment, and we really all thought that that he'd done it and that was fine, and it was very grueling treatment, and he found it very difficult. We all found it very difficult, but we thought he'd got through it. But obviously when it came back, it got more and more each time it came back. And it came back in 2008, and then 2010, 2011 and 2012. And in between each of those cases, he was clear. So it did keep coming back. And each time it got a bit more aggressive and more aggressive, till in the end it wasn't reacting to chemotherapy anymore.
When he passed away, and just before he passed away, obviously we want to talk about your book that you've written, which is John, A True Story. And was it him that wanted to write a book, or was it that you wanted to write the book?
No, I hadn't thought about writing a book, but because he'd had such a roller coaster of a ride, really, with the tumours that came and went, but everything in between as well that he did, because he did a lot of things in between being ill, and he worked very hard, and he was a very inspirational person to a lot of people, actually, but and funny as well. But just before, I think probably it was just after we'd been to see the consultant the last time we saw her, and it was agreed, or she said, this chemotherapy that you're having at the moment really isn't working. You're not well enough to have any more. And it was sort of, she never said it, but it was obvious that was pretty much the end of the road. And the following morning, he looked across his room and said to me, it's too late for me, but will you write a book about me when I've gone? And people had been saying to him, you should write your story, John. And of course, he tried a few times, but it hadn't got very far. And so I said I would. And consequently, I was a bit obliged to make an effort to do that. And it wasn't something I thought of doing. But I actually think he was quite clever, because I think he knew that if I had a project to get my teeth into, it would actually be good for me. It would give me something very positive to do, and so it was. So shortly after he passed away, I started thinking about it, and I bought a notebook and pens, and we had constructed for him in 2010 when he'd had to move. He was in a flat in Bath at that time, and he absolutely loved it. And he just bought this new furniture to go into the sort of sitting end of this great big bed sit room, and he'd had to come home, and so we had this log cabin constructed in the garden, as sort of like a garden room, and so his furniture could go in it. So he had his own sort of sitting room and place to hang out and watch television and what have you, and entertain his friends. So that was the obvious place. So I took myself into John's hut. We call it John's hut, and where I was surrounded by pictures of him and his hats and different things that live in there. And it was a very, very cathartic and therapeutic thing to do, to sort of relive. Well, I started with the end, actually, because those memories were very fresh in my mind. And then I sort of wrote a list of the things that I wanted to include in the book and worked my way through my memories, which is actually a really lovely thing to do, because so many of my memories were very happy ones, and the special things that we'd done and how he was as a little boy, and the times that we shared. And so although it was very, very hard, because obviously the most painful times of my life were there were some really lovely times as well. So it was a really good thing for me to have to do, to get my teeth into.
How long did it take you to write it?
It took 3 years from the date I started writing it. It was almost exactly 3 years between starting to write it in a notebook and having the published book. Writing it in the notebook took a long time, and then I kept revisiting it and changing bits. But then I had to do it on the computer, and that actually took a long time to transfer my handwritten memories into a coherent text on a computer was a long process. And then I kept going over it and changing bits and adding bits. I originally thought it would only really be read by a handful of people that knew him, and so that they would know all the places I was talking about and all the people that I mentioned. And then I thought, but perhaps if people don't know him, they won't know who these people are. So I sort of started putting a bit more description in and of places and people that were in there. So that took quite a while. But I had it sort of ready to the printed out draft stage when one of my daughters lives in New Zealand, and she has a creative writing degree. And she was coming back from New Zealand in February of last year, about this time last year, actually, she was here. So I printed it out in its draft form for her to read, to gauge her reaction. And she was so lovely about it. I mean, she read it, she couldn't put it down. She just kept reading it and said, you must find a publisher, Mum, you must follow this up. And she really thought that she was very complimentary, which was delightful to me. I didn't think she would be. She was the first one to sort of proofread it for me. And then my husband also read it at that point before it went to a publisher. He read it as well. But I have to say, he found it very hard to read. He found it very emotional. But he did, bless him. But then the publisher bit was quite amazing, a stroke of God fortune, I think. We visit Cirencester, which is in the Cotswolds, not far away from here, at regular intervals, and we were staying there. We have a cafe that we particularly like, and we were making our way to the cafe to have some lunch. And just before it, on the right-hand side, there was a big doorway and a brass plaque on the doorway, and it said Memoirs Publishing. And I stopped in my tracks, and I looked at my husband and I said, Memoirs Publishing.
Oh, wow.
That sounds exactly right. So as soon as we got home, I looked them up, and they were exactly what I was looking for. And so, then the process of editing things came through. So that all fell into place, really. So it was 3 years, yeah.
So when you then finished the book and you had it published,
it's on Amazon. And you can get it on Amazon or Kindle or all the other ebook outlets. But also, I mean, I have bought copies. I keep buying some more, actually, because I keep selling them and then buying some more from the publisher. So the ones that I sell myself are raising money for John's fund with the Brain Tumour charity.
Brilliant. Right.
And so far, we've since we had a lovely launch event last September. Lots of people came. And lots of people bought the book. And since that day, we've actually raised over £1,800 for the fund. So just from the sales of the book. So the ones that people buy from me they're the best ones actually as well, because they have colour pictures in the middle. So that's the best way of buying one. But they are also available on Amazon and obviously on Kindle as well. But you don't get the pictures with Kindle.
So if someone wants to get the book as well and they want to contact you, what's the best way of contacting you? Would it be on maybe a Twitter or on your website?
I think Twitter. I think probably to contact me via Twitter, and then I can send a direct message, because I'm very happy to post them out. I've been sending them out all over the place. So that's I'm very happy to do that.
Just to let people know on the radio that your Twitter account is Jacky Fred. So just to spell it, JACKYFRED1. Thank you again so much for sharing your story and for letting us, know a bit more about John and about the book. And
thank